My name is Rachel, I'm 32, and I own a successful upscale restaurant in downtown Chicago called Meridian. Last Tuesday night started like any other busy evening, until my sister Emma walked in with her fake designer bag and entitled attitude, demanding the VIP treatment she'd never earned. What happened next exposed a web of family lies that had been poisoning my life for years, and by the time the check arrived at $5.349, Emma's world came crashing down in front of a dining room full of witnesses. The aftermath didn't just destroy her carefully constructed facade, it revealed a betrayal so deep that it changed our entire family dynamic forever. Before we dive into this family revenge story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. If you've ever dealt with entitled family members who think they deserve special treatment, you'll want to stick around for this. 1. Hit that like button if you're ready for some serious justice, and don't forget to subscribe, because family karma stories like this don't come around every day. Trust me, you won't see this ending coming. Growing up, Emma had always been the golden child. 3 years younger than me, she possessed this natural charm that made everyone gravitate toward her. Our parents, especially our mother, seemed to believe that Emma could do no wrong. While I worked multiple jobs throughout high school and college to pay for culinary school, Emma somehow always had money for designer clothes, expensive trips, and the latest gadgets. When I asked where the funds came from, my parents would give vague answers about Emma being resourceful or having generous friends. The restaurant industry is brutal, and building Meridian from the ground up took everything I had. I started as a line cook, making minimum wage, working 16-hour days, and sleeping on friends' couches. Every dollar I earned went toward my dream of opening my own place. I spent years perfecting my craft, learning the business side, and building relationships with suppliers and investors. When I finally opened Meridian 4 years ago, it was the culmination of 15 years of blood, sweat, and sacrifice. Emma, on the other hand, seemed to float through life without consequence. She'd held various jobs: marketing assistant, social media coordinator, event planner, but nothing ever stuck for more than a year. Despite her inconsistent work history, she maintained an expensive lifestyle that never quite made sense. She lived in a trendy downtown loft, drove a BMW, and regularly posted Instagram photos from high-end restaurants and exclusive events. When family members asked about her success, Emma would wave her hand dismissively and mention consulting work or side projects without ever providing specifics. Our relationship had always been strained, but it reached a breaking point 6 months ago during our father's birthday dinner. Emma had shown up wearing a Hermes scarf that I knew cost more than most people's rent, claiming she'd earned a bonus from her latest job. When I privately asked our mother about Emma's finances, she became defensive and suggested I was jealous of my sister's success. That conversation planted a seed of suspicion that had been growing ever since. Meridian had become one of Chicago's most sought-after dining destinations. We served modern American cuisine with a focus on locally sourced ingredients, and our wine list had won multiple awards. The restaurant seated 120 people, and we were booked solid most nights. Our clientele included celebrities, business executives, and food enthusiasts, willing to pay premium prices for an exceptional experience. The VIP section, which Emma would soon discover, was reserved for our most valued customers, people who had earned their status through loyalty and respect, not entitlement. The staff at Meridian was like family to me. I'd hired people who shared my passion for hospitality and excellence. Maria, my floor manager, had worked with me for 3 years and could read a dining room like a book. James, our sommelier, had an encyclopedic knowledge of wine and could pair anything perfectly. The kitchen staff was a well-oiled machine that could handle the pressure of a full house without breaking a sweat. Together, we'd built something special, and I was fiercely protective of both the restaurant's reputation and the people who made it possible. Emma knew about my success, of course. She'd been to Meridian exactly twice since it opened, both times as my guest for family celebrations. During those visits, she'd made comments about the prices being a bit much, and suggested I was trying too hard with the upscale atmosphere. She seemed to view my achievement with a mixture of dismissal and resentment, as if my hard-earned success somehow diminished her own accomplishments. Little did I know that her attitude toward my restaurant was about to become the catalyst for exposing the truth about her entire life. Tuesday evening started perfectly normal. The dinner rush was in full swing, every table occupied, and the energy in the dining room was electric. I was expediting orders in the kitchen when Maria appeared at my station with a concerned expression I'd rarely seen before. "Rachel, we have a situation," she said, lowering her voice. "Your sister just walked in with a party of 6, demanding the VIP section. She's telling everyone within earshot that she's the owner's sister and expects immediate seating." My stomach dropped. Emma hadn't made a reservation, and I certainly hadn't invited her. The VIP section was fully booked with regulars who'd reserved weeks in advance. But what made my blood boil was the way Maria described Emma's behavior: loud, demanding, and using our family connection as leverage for special treatment. I wiped my hands on my apron and followed Maria to the front of the restaurant. There was Emma, looking every inch the part of someone who belonged in an upscale establishment. She wore what appeared to be a designer dress, carried a handbag that looked expensive, and had positioned herself strategically near the hostess stand, where other waiting guests could hear every word she said. "I don't think you understand," Emma was saying to our hostess Jessica, in a voice pitched just loud enough to carry. "I'm Rachel's sister. This is basically my restaurant too. We need the VIP section, and we need it now. These are very important clients of mine, and they're expecting the best treatment." The 6 people with Emma looked uncomfortable but intrigued. They were dressed professionally, and I could hear snippets of their conversation about closing deals and impressing investors. It became clear that Emma had brought business contacts to my restaurant, promising them an experience she had no authority to guarantee. Jessica, bless her heart, maintained perfect composure despite Emma's increasingly aggressive tone. "I understand your relationship with the owner, but our VIP section is fully reserved this evening. I'd be happy to put you on our wait list for the main dining room, which should be about 90 minutes. 90 minutes! Emma's voice rose an octave. "Do you know who I am? Do you know how much money I bring to this establishment? I could have my sister fire you with one phone call." That's when I decided to make my presence known. I approached the hostess stand with a calm smile, but inside I was seething. Emma's behavior wasn't just embarrassing, it was unprofessional and potentially damaging to the restaurant's reputation. "Good evening, Emma," I said coolly. "I didn't realize you were planning to visit tonight." Emma's face lit up with false warmth and relief. "Rachel, perfect timing. I was just explaining to your hostess that we need the VIP section for my business partners here. This is exactly the kind of high-end experience they're looking for." The 6 people with Emma extended their hands for introductions, clearly impressed to meet the owner. I shook hands politely while studying their faces, noting their expensive watches and confident demeanor. These weren't random friends, they were legitimate business people who Emma was apparently trying to impress. "I'm afraid the VIP section is fully booked tonight," I said, maintaining my professional tone. "However, I'd be happy to accommodate your party in our main dining room. The experience is identical, just without the private setting." Emma's smile faltered slightly, but she quickly recovered. "Oh, come on, Rachel. Surely you can make an exception for family. These gentlemen are considering a significant investment opportunity with me, and I promised them the full VIP treatment." The word investment caught my attention. Emma had never mentioned being involved in anything that would attract serious investors. I glanced at the businessmen who were watching our exchange with keen interest, clearly evaluating not just the restaurant but Emma's influence within it. "Let me see what I can do," I said, excusing myself momentarily. I pulled Maria aside and learned that the VIP section was indeed fully booked, but one party hadn't arrived yet. We could potentially accommodate Emma's group, but it would mean displacing valued customers if they showed up. More importantly, I realized this was an opportunity to observe Emma's behavior and perhaps understand more about her mysterious financial situation. "Seat them in VIP," I decided. "But I want full documentation of everything they order, every bottle of wine, every course, every addition, and make sure Emma knows she's responsible for the bill." Maria nodded, understanding the implications. Emma was about to get exactly what she'd demanded, but it would come with consequences she hadn't anticipated. As I watched Jessica escort Emma's party to the VIP section, I couldn't shake the feeling that this evening was going to reveal more than I was prepared to discover about my sister's true nature. What unfolded over the next 3 hours was like watching a masterclass in deception and entitlement. From my position in the kitchen, I had a clear view of the VIP section through the service window, and what I witnessed made my blood boil with each passing minute. Emma had transformed into someone I barely recognized. She held court at the head of the table, gesturing grandly as she spoke about her restaurant and the family business. I watched in horror as she implied to her guests that she was not just my sister but a co-owner of Meridian. She spoke knowledgeably about our wine selection, claiming credit for choices I'd made personally, and described menu items as if she'd had a hand in developing them. But it was the ordering that truly revealed Emma's game plan. She started with a bottle of our most expensive champagne, Dom Perignon 2010, which retailed for $450. When the sommelier James presented the bottle, Emma waved him away dismissively and declared, "Just open it." My sister insists on only the best for VIP guests. The appetizers came next, 6 orders of our Ossetra caviar service, at $85 each, plus our signature foie gras preparation. Emma explained to her guests that these were complimentary tastings that demonstrated the restaurant's commitment to excellence. The businessmen exchanged impressed glances, clearly buying into Emma's narrative about her elevated status within the establishment. I had to step away from the kitchen several times to calm my rising anger. Each time I checked on the VIP section, Emma had escalated further. She'd ordered a second bottle of champagne, this time a Krug Grande Cuvée, for $380, and had moved on to our premium wine pairings for the main courses. 6 dry-aged steaks, each $75, accompanied by sides of truffle risotto and roasted lobster tail. Maria appeared at my elbow during one of these observations, her face grim. "Rachel, she's telling them that everything tonight is on the house as a gesture of appreciation for their business relationship with her. The gentlemen keep trying to insist on paying, but Emma keeps deflecting, saying it's all been arranged with management." My hands clenched into fists. Emma wasn't just dining expensively on someone else's dime, she was actively lying to legitimate business people, potentially damaging relationships that might have real consequences for their careers. These men believed they were receiving preferential treatment based on Emma's supposed influence, and when the truth came out, they would feel manipulated and embarrassed. The situation reached its peak when Emma ordered dessert. Not content with our regular offerings, she insisted on our off-menu tasting experience, a 7-course dessert progression paired with rare ports and cognacs that we typically reserved for special occasions. The cost for 6 people would exceed $600, but Emma presented it as another family privilege that demonstrated her importance to the restaurant's operations. But what I witnessed next through the service window made my decision for me. One of the businessmen, a distinguished gentleman in his 50s, had pulled out his phone and was clearly preparing to make a call. I watched Emma's body language shift as she leaned in urgently, and I could see her lips moving rapidly as she spoke to him. Whatever she was saying, it involved gesturing toward the restaurant and repeatedly pointing to herself. That's when Maria delivered the information that confirmed my worst suspicions. She'd been discreetly listening to the conversation and overheard Emma promising the businessman that she could arrange private dining events at Meridian for his company's clients. More damaging, Emma had quoted pricing that was significantly below our actual rates, and had committed to availability during dates when we were already fully booked. I realized that this wasn't just about a free, expensive meal. Emma was using my restaurant as a prop in some larger scheme, potentially defrauding these business people or setting up deals she had no authority to make. The implications went far beyond tonight's dinner. She was actively damaging my business reputation and potentially exposing me to legal liability. The final straw came when I overheard Emma on a phone call in the restroom corridor. She was speaking to someone named Marcus and bragging about how easily she'd convinced her sister to comp an expensive dinner for investors. But it was her next words that made my blood run cold. "Don't worry, once the trust fund documentation comes through, we'll have enough to cover the restaurant buyout. Rachel has no idea what's coming. Trust fund buyout. My hands were shaking as I processed the implications. Emma wasn't just lying to strangers, she was apparently involved in some scheme that directly threatened my ownership of Meridian. The pieces of her mysterious wealth and confident behavior suddenly started forming a terrifying picture. I returned to the kitchen with a new understanding of what was at stake. This wasn't about teaching Emma a lesson about entitlement, this was about protecting everything I'd worked to build. And the $5.349.50 bill that was accumulating in the VIP section was about to become the least of Emma's problems. The evening was far from over, but I now knew exactly how it was going to end. Emma had played her hand, and now it was time for me to play mine. The businessmen deserved to know the truth about who they were dealing with, and Emma was about to learn that actions have consequences, especially when those actions threaten someone's livelihood and dreams. Justice was coming, and it was going to be served at exactly the right temperature. By 10 o'clock, Emma's party had moved into what could only be described as a celebration. The businessmen were clearly impressed with both the food and what they believed was Emma's influence within the establishment. I watched through the service window as they raised their glasses in toasts, with Emma basking in the attention and continuing to spin her web of lies about her role in the restaurant's success. The bill had reached astronomical proportions. In addition to the champagne wine pairings and premium menu items, Emma had ordered a rare bottle of 1996 Chateau d'Yquem for dessert service, a $800 wine that we kept for only the most special occasions. She'd also insisted on our premium coffee service with aged cognacs, and had somehow convinced James to open a bottle of 30-year-old Macallan whiskey that cost $150 per pour. But what sealed Emma's fate was the conversation I overheard when I finally decided to approach the table directly. Disguised as a routine owner's check-in with VIP guests, I arrived just as one of the businessmen was asking Emma about her investment portfolio and whether she'd be interested in expanding the restaurant concept to other cities. "Oh, absolutely," Emma replied without hesitation. "Rachel and I have been discussing franchise opportunities for months. We're looking at locations in New York and Los Angeles next year. Of course, I handle all the business development side while she focuses on the culinary aspects." The businessman's eyes lit up. "That's exactly the kind of vision we're looking for in our restaurant investment fund. We've been seeking established concepts with growth potential and family ownership structures." I felt my world tilting. Emma wasn't just lying about tonight's dinner, she was apparently positioning herself as my business partner to attract investment money under false pretenses. The legal implications alone could destroy everything I'd built, not to mention the ethical violation of deceiving these legitimate investors. "Gentlemen," I said, maintaining my composure with superhuman effort, "I hope you're enjoying your evening. Emma, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" Emma's confident smile faltered slightly, but she recovered quickly. "Of course, excuse me, gentlemen, my sister probably wants to discuss some operational details." We stepped into the small private office adjacent to the dining room. The moment the door closed, Emma's demeanor shifted dramatically. Gone was the confident businesswoman persona, replaced by the defensive little sister I remembered from childhood. "Before you say anything," Emma began, "I know tonight got a little carried away, but these are really important contacts for me. Mr. Davidson runs a major investment fund, and if I can impress him, it could change everything for both of us." "Both of us," I kept my voice dangerously low. "Emma, you've been lying to those men all evening. You're not a co-owner of this restaurant. You have no authority to make business commitments on my behalf. And you certainly have no right to promise them free meals and special treatment." Emma's face flushed, but she pushed forward with her justification. "Look, I may have exaggerated a little, but it's for a good cause. These guys have serious money, Rachel. If we play this right, we could expand Meridian into a whole chain. Think about the opportunities I repeated incredulously. There is no we in this business, Emma. I built this restaurant with my own hands, my own money, and 15 years of my life. You've never invested a single dollar or worked a single shift. What exactly makes you think you have any claim to my success?" For the first time that evening, Emma's mask slipped completely. The entitled confidence evaporated, revealing something uglier underneath. God, Rachel, you're so selfish. Do you know how hard it's been? Being your sister, living in the shadow of the successful restaurateur, while everyone expects me to be just as accomplished. I'm trying to build something for myself here. By lying and potentially exposing me to legal liability, my voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. Emma, if those men invest money based on false information you've provided, I could lose everything. My license, my reputation, my restaurant, everything I've worked for could be gone. Emma's response revealed the depth of her delusion. That's exactly why you need me. I understand business development and investor relations. You're great with the cooking and management stuff, but you don't know how to think big picture. Together, we could be unstoppable. I stared at my sister, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time in our adult lives. This wasn't just about tonight's dinner, or even the lying to potential investors. This was about a fundamental lack of respect for boundaries, hard work, and truth itself. Emma had convinced herself that her lies were justified because the ends might benefit both of us, completely ignoring the fact that she had no right to make that decision. Emma, I said carefully, those men out there believe they're discussing business with a co-owner of this establishment. They're making decisions based on false information. Even if your intentions were good, what you're doing is fraud. Her face hardened. Fraud, that's a little dramatic, don't you think? I'm networking. I'm creating opportunities. Maybe if you weren't so rigid about everything, you'd see the potential here. The potential for what? To destroy my reputation. To face lawsuits when those investors realize they've been deceived. To lose my restaurant license when the state investigates fraudulent business practices. Emma rolled her eyes. You're being paranoid. Nothing bad is going to happen. These guys are smart businessmen. They'll do their due diligence before investing anything significant. By then we can work out the details of our partnership. There will be no partnership. The words came out louder than I intended. Emma, you need to go back to that table and tell those men the truth. All of it. That you're not a co-owner, that you have no authority to make business commitments, and that you've been misrepresenting your role here all evening. Emma's face went white, then red with anger. I will not humiliate myself like that. Do you know what this could mean for my career? For my reputation? These are exactly the kind of contacts I need to finally make something of myself. And what about my career, my reputation? I shot back. What about the fact that your lies could cost me everything I've worked for? We stared at each other in silence for a long moment, and I realized that this confrontation had revealed an unbridgeable gap between us. Emma saw my success as something she deserved to share in simply by virtue of being my sister. She felt entitled to use my achievements as leverage for her own advancement, regardless of the cost to me or the people she deceived in the process. I'm going back to my guests, Emma said, finally, her voice cold. And I suggest you think carefully about how you handle this situation. Those men could make us both very wealthy, but only if you don't ruin it with your perfectionist control issues. As she reached for the door handle, I made my decision. Emma, when you go back to that table, the bill will be waiting for you. All $5, 349.5 of it. And if you're not prepared to pay it and tell those men the truth about your role here, I'll be happy to explain the situation myself. Emma's hand froze on the door handle. For the first time all evening, she looked genuinely afraid. The real confrontation was about to begin. Emma's face went through a series of expressions: shock, anger, disbelief, and finally panic. You can't be serious, she whispered. Over $5,000 for one dinner. Look at what you ordered, Emma. 2 bottles of Dom Perignon the Krug, a $800 dessert, wine premium steaks for 6 people, caviar service, the off-menu dessert progression, and that 30-year Macallan you insisted on. Every single item was top shelf, and you ordered it while promising your guests it was complimentary. Emma's composure cracked completely. I don't have that kind of money, Rachel. You know I don't, I thought. I assumed you'd cover it as a family gesture. A family gesture. I couldn't hide my incredulity. You walked into my restaurant unannounced, demanded VIP treatment, lied to paying customers about being a co-owner, and ordered the most expensive items on our menu, while promising people it was free. And you thought I'd just absorb a $5,000 loss because we share DNA, please. Emma's voice took on a desperate edge. These investors could change everything for me. Mr. Davidson has already hinted at bringing me into his fund as a consultant. If I have to admit I can't pay for dinner, it'll destroy my credibility completely. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered her phone conversation about trust funds and restaurant buyouts, and my resolve hardened. Emma, your credibility should be based on truth, not elaborate lies. If these businessmen are worth impressing, they'll respect honesty more than deception. Emma's desperation transformed into familiar manipulation tactics. Fine, if you won't help me because we're family, then think about your precious restaurant. Do you really want to create a scene in front of important potential customers? What if they leave bad reviews? What if word gets out that Meridian's owner publicly humiliated her own sister? I realized this was the moment of truth, not just for tonight but for our entire relationship going forward. Emma was betting that I'd prioritize public perception over principle, that I'd enable her behavior to avoid embarrassment. It was a calculated gamble based on years of watching me smooth over her mistakes to maintain family harmony. You're right, I said quietly. I don't want to create a scene. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to return to that table, enjoy the rest of your evening, and when the bill comes, you'll handle it however you see fit. Emma's composure cracked completely. I don't have that kind of money, Rachel. You know I don't, I thought. I assumed you'd cover it as a family gesture. A family gesture. I couldn't hide my incredulity. You walked into my restaurant unannounced, demanded VIP treatment, lied to paying customers about being a co-owner, and ordered the most expensive items on our menu, while promising people it was free. But Emma, and this is non-negotiable, you will not make any more business promises on my behalf, and you will clarify your actual role here before the evening ends. Relief flooded Emma's face. Thank you, Rachel. I knew you'd understand. I promise I'll be more careful about how I phrase things. I'm not finished, I continued. After tonight, you're banned from Meridian. Not as punishment but as protection for both my business and your apparent inability to tell the truth when it matters. Emma plastered on her fake smile and rejoined her guests, who were now sampling the cognac service and discussing investment portfolios with increasing enthusiasm. I positioned myself where I could observe the table while remaining out of direct sight. What happened next exceeded even my worst expectations. Instead of clarifying her role or toning down her claims, Emma doubled down on her deception. I watched in horror as she pulled out her phone and showed the businessmen what appeared to be official documents. Documents that from my angle looked suspiciously like the incorporation papers for Meridian that I'd filed years ago. One of the men, Mr. Davidson, studied the documents carefully before nodding approvingly. This ownership structure is exactly what our fund looks for, he said. Equal partnerships between family members create stability and shared accountability. Equal partnerships. Emma had somehow convinced these men that she owned 50% of my restaurant. The legal and financial implications hit me like a physical blow. If these investors proceeded based on that false information, the resulting lawsuits could indeed destroy everything I'd built. I signaled Maria to print the final bill and bring it to the VIP table. It was time to end this charade before Emma could cause any more damage. The total came to $5,349.50, a staggering amount that reflected Emma's complete disregard for financial reality or consequences. As Maria approached the table with the leather bill folder, I watched Emma's body language shift. Her confident gestures became more nervous, and she kept glancing toward the exits. The moment of truth was arriving, and despite all her bravado, she knew she was about to be exposed. Mr. Davidson reached for the bill folder with practiced ease, clearly intending to review the charges as any responsible businessman would. Emma's hand shot out to stop him. "Oh, that's not necessary," she said quickly. "As I mentioned, this is all arranged through our family account." But Mr. Davidson was already opening the folder, his experienced eyes scanning the itemized charges. His expression shifted from casual interest to sharp attention as he processed the total. $5,349.50. 50, he read aloud, causing the other men to look up in surprise. That seems quite reasonable for 6 people at this level of establishment, one of them commented. The wine pairings alone were exceptional. Emma forced a laugh. Yes, we believe in providing authentic experiences for our valued guests. But Mr. Davidson wasn't finished examining the bill. His business acumen was clearly engaged as he studied each line item. This is fascinating, he said. It was a calculated gamble based on years of watching me smooth over her mistakes to maintain family harmony. You're right, I said quietly. I don't want to create a scene. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to return to that table, enjoy the rest of your evening, and when the bill comes, you'll handle it however you see fit. Well, Emma stammered, it's quite complex. Rachel handles most of the day-to-day financial operations. Of course, Mr. Davidson nodded. But as co-owner, you'd certainly understand the promotional budget allocations and revenue impact calculations. We'd need that information for our due diligence process. I realized Emma was about to be exposed by her own lies, and I had to decide whether to let her crash and burn publicly or intervene to protect both her and the innocent businessmen from further embarrassment. The choice would define not just how this evening ended, but how our relationship would continue, or whether it would continue at all. The bill sat open on the table, the number glowing like an accusation. Emma's carefully constructed facade was crumbling in real time, and there was nowhere left to hide. I made my decision, and approached the table with the calm professionalism that had carried me through 15 years in the restaurant business. Gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed your evening at Meridian. I'm Rachel, the owner and chef. The businessmen stood to shake hands, their faces showing genuine appreciation for the meal they'd experienced. Mr. Davidson spoke for the group. Absolutely exceptional, Rachel. Your sister has been telling us about your partnership and expansion plans. Very impressive operation you've built together. I appreciate your kind words, I replied carefully. However, I think there may be some misunderstanding about our business structure that I should clarify. Emma's face went white, but I continued with measured precision. Emma is my sister, but she's not involved in Meridian's ownership or operations. She's a valued family member, but any business discussions tonight would have been purely speculative on her part. The silence that followed was deafening. 6 sets of eyes turned to Emma, who looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. Mr. Davidson's expression shifted from confusion to understanding, to barely contained professional anger. I see, he said slowly. Emma, when you spoke about expansion plans and showed us incorporation documents you were speaking, hypothetically, Emma opened her mouth but no words came out. The weight of her deception was crushing down on her in front of everyone she'd been trying to impress. One of the other businessmen cleared his throat uncomfortably and began gathering his jacket. Gentlemen, I said I take full responsibility for any confusion. The meal you've enjoyed tonight represents the quality and service we provide to all our guests. As for the bill, please allow me to arrange appropriate compensation for any misunderstanding about tonight's arrangements. But Mr. Davidson held up his hand. That won't be necessary, Rachel. The meal was excellent, and we're happy to pay for what we've enjoyed. However, Emma, we'll need to reconsider any business discussions we had this evening. Emma finally found her voice, but it came out as a whisper. I can explain. I don't think explanations will be necessary, Mr. Davidson replied firmly. He pulled out his credit card and handed it to Maria. Please charge the full amount to this card. And Rachel, thank you for your honesty. It speaks well of your establishment's integrity. As the businessmen settled the bill and prepared to leave, Emma sat frozen in her chair. The confident woman who'd held court all evening had disappeared, replaced by someone who looked small and defeated. When the last of her guests had gone, she finally looked up at me with tears in her eyes. You humiliated me, she said quietly. No, Emma, you humiliated yourself. I just prevented you from making it worse. Those were real opportunities, Rachel. Real investors who could have changed both our lives. Based on lies, I pointed out. Emma, even if they'd invested money, what did you think would happen when they discovered the truth, when they realized you had no ownership stake, no business authority, no legal right to make the commitments you were promising? Emma had no answer. We sat in silence for several minutes, the empty VIP section around us, serving as a monument to her spectacular failure in judgment. "I need help," she finally admitted. "The truth is, I've been struggling financially for months. The consulting work dried up and I've been using credit cards to maintain my lifestyle. I thought if I could just make the right connections, find the right opportunity. By lying about owning my restaurant, by being associated with success for once in my life." The words burst out of her with years of frustration behind them. "Do you know what it's like being the failure sister? Watching you build something amazing while I can barely keep my rent current? I thought maybe if I could just borrow some of your success temporarily, I could turn it into something real." For the first time that evening, I saw genuine emotion from Emma, instead of manipulation or entitlement. But understanding her motivation didn't excuse her behavior or erase the damage she'd tried to cause. "Emma, I understand feeling overshadowed or struggling to find your path. But lying to investors using my business as collateral for your schemes, and potentially exposing me to legal liability, that's not borrowing success. That's stealing it." She nodded miserably. "I know. Do you really want to create a scene in front of important potential customers? What if they leave bad reviews? What if word gets out that Meridian's owner publicly humiliated her own sister?" I realized this was the moment of truth, not just for tonight but for our entire relationship going forward. Emma was betting that I'd prioritize public perception over principle, that I'd enable her behavior to avoid embarrassment. I know it was wrong. But I was desperate, and when the opportunity presented itself, you chose deception over honesty. You chose to risk my livelihood for your convenience. I paused, choosing my next words carefully. "Emma, you mentioned earlier that you've been struggling financially. The truth is, if you'd come to me honestly and asked for help, we could have worked something out. A loan, a job here at the restaurant, business advice, there were options that didn't involve fraud." She'd been living in a house of cards, and tonight had been a desperate attempt to find new foundations before everything collapsed. More importantly, she acknowledged that her behavior toward my success had been driven by resentment and entitlement rather than pride in her sister's accomplishments. She'd seen my restaurant not as something to celebrate, but as something she deserved to benefit from, simply by virtue of our relationship. By the time we finished talking, it was nearly midnight. Emma agreed to seek financial counseling and commit to rebuilding her life on honest foundations. I agreed to help with clear boundaries and expectations about behavior and respect. The bill for $5,349.5 had been paid by Mr. Davidson, a professional gesture that maintained his dignity while making clear that Emma's deception had consequences. But the real cost wasn't financial, it was the lesson about integrity, family boundaries, and the difference between earning success and stealing it. 6 months later, Emma is working as a server at a restaurant across town, learning the business from the ground up and slowly paying down her debts. She's banned from Meridian for another year, but we're rebuilding our relationship on more honest terms. Sometimes, the greatest gift you can give someone is refusing to enable their worst impulses. The businessmen never returned to Meridian, but word of how I'd handled the situation apparently spread through Chicago's investment community. Several legitimate opportunities have come our way from people who value integrity over connections. Truth, it turns out, is still the best foundation for any business. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? It's one of the hardest decisions we face, but sometimes protecting someone means refusing to protect them from the consequences of their actions. The justice wasn't just in Emma paying that astronomical bill, it was in finally learning that success built on lies isn't success at all. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your own experiences with family drama and the lessons learned when justice finally arrives. Drop a comment below about how you've handled entitled family members or situations where you had to choose between loyalty and integrity. Don't forget to like this video if you believe in the power of truth over deception, and subscribe for more real-life stories about family karma and the moments when everything comes full circle. Share this with anyone who's ever dealt with a family member who thought they deserved special treatment without earning it. Sometimes we all need reminders that actions have consequences, and the people closest to us aren't exempt. from basic respect and honesty. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of the most challenging nights of my life. And remember, integrity isn't about being perfect, it's about being honest when perfection fails. Here's to family relationships built on truth rather than convenience, and to the courage to set boundaries when love alone isn't enough.